Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Top Billers Toolkit, where me and my twin brother interview recruiters from all around the globe to unlock the secrets to their success. Today's guest is Matt Potenza. Matt is a New York-based recruiter who's been billing between 500 and $1 million for the best part of a decade now. He hit his first million in 2022 and did it again in 2024. What I love about this episode is Matt shows us his entire billings over the 10-year period he's been recruiting, and it's a very clear indication that $1 million billers are not created overnight. Matt took 6 years and he's still learning every single day on the job. In today's episode, Matt breaks down his exact day plan, what he does on a daily basis, how much BD, and exactly what he's doing to win new clients. He goes through his exact MPC approach, and we also talk about mindset, what it takes to become a top performer in recruitment. This was really a masterclass on the fundamentals done well and done consistently over time. I hope you enjoy this episode, guys. Me and Sam certainly did. And as usual, grab a cuppa or a glass of wine, depending on when you're listening to this, and let's get into it, shall we? Wait a second, guys. Quick question for you. If you could land a new client on LinkedIn in the next couple of weeks, how much would that be worth to you? 20, 30, maybe 40K? Well, we have a pretty crazy offer on right now. If you are a recruitment business owner, then we will work with you for free and write you 2 posts at absolutely no cost. And here's the cool part. Other recruiters that have come through this free trial have managed to win new clients. They've racked up hundreds of thousands of impressions and started conversations with top-tier candidates. It's completely risk-free, so you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. If you're interested, the link's in the description below. If not, no worries. We hope you enjoy the podcast. See you later. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today on Top Billers Toolkit. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Yeah, just surviving the heat out here in New York. I think it might crack 100, maybe even 102 today. But other than that, thrilled to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
That sounds nuts. Yeah, we finally had a day today in the UK, which is a little bit cooler, and it is so nice. I welcome it with open arms.
Same.
Let's jump into the first question, Matt, as always, which is what's the number one tool in your toolkit, whether it be a mindset, strategy, or software?
Yeah, so I think, I think I got to go with the mindset on there first and foremost. Before I had gotten into recruitment, before I really even knew what it was, I was interviewing jobs for sales for a long time. And I remember there was a guy who said the phrase that this is a contact sport and contact equals contract. Right. So the more contacts you make, the more contracts, the more deals you'll do at the end of the day. So I go in there every day with that mindset, trying to figure out, okay, how can I contact as many people as possible and try to break into that market? Outside of the mindset, though, there is a second thing which I brought with me as sort of a key tool, and I never leave home without it. I got my handy dandy day plan right here. Oh, it's blurred, but I would write one out every single day before I leave the office. And that way, when you come in, you just get right after it. I don't know what I'd do without one of those.
I love that. You're the first person who's shown up a physical day plan, which is amazing.
I tried doing it digitally, and for some reason, I just never remember to look at it. So I have to write down everything, and I have sloppy handwriting, so sometimes it takes a while to read it, but go figure.
I'd love to jump straight into the day plan because it's so unique, Matt, in terms of the answer for the first question. What is it you're writing on the day plan? And maybe you can just give us a little bit of an insight into what that looks like.
Yeah. So the first thing I fill out is something that a mentor of mine told me about a while back, which I try to stress to everybody, which is sort of a 10 before 10 list, it's called. And that can be a mixture of clients you're trying to break into, candidates you're trying to get on the phone for jobs, but listing the first 10 people that you call, right when you walk in, before things get busy, so that at the very least, all right, I knocked those out. Those are the 10 most important things we wanted to get done, and then we can go from there. From there, I just, that helps me to get into, I'll talk a little bit later on probably about it, getting into a bit of a flow state when it comes to the calls, right? So if you can knock out 10 of those, then, I can usually continue from about 8:30 up to around 10:30, 11, just making that the primary focus of when I'm doing a lot of my outreach. Again, some days it could be more candidate driven. Most days it is business development driven and trying to go out to clients and at least knock out all the phone stuff early so that I can do that. And then from there, for about 11 to 1, I usually focus on sending email follow-ups or LinkedIn messages to follow up on those depending on the day and chasing the hot leads that I have out there. Usually hit lunch after that. And then for the afternoon, pretty much take care of anything that's top priority or any like meetings that I booked. I try to put all meetings to the afternoon. That way I can knock out everything in the morning and then just have those kind of continuous, back to back, hopefully with any clients that we're trying to get deals on with or any candidates that, we have some pre-scheduled calls with.
Awesome. And just to clarify, Matt, I think I asked you, but are you mainly business development focused? Do you have any resources helping you, or is it a kind of solo 360 desk you're running at the moment?
Yeah, so I run a 360 desk. We do have a team around us that if there's a job that is tough to fill, we'll call it like our team jobs and whatnot, and then we'll have other people come in and help where need be. But for the most part, I'm handling a 360 desk.
Awesome. Which is, I was hoping you would say that because you are doing still a shed load of BD every day. So you're doing like what, 3-4 hours at least every day, Matt? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to get out there, you got to meet people, and you got to make that a priority.
Love that. And so, and I'm guessing you're writing. So with your day plans? What are the things that you're preparing that make the biggest difference? Is it? I'm guessing you're preparing those 10 people that you're going to call, and you're preparing. What else are you preparing before you get in, Matt? That makes the biggest difference to like the organization of the day. Do you think?
Yeah, so I try to keep it simple. I don't try to load up with too many different tasks. I try to find like, all right, if I'm going to be doing business development tomorrow, what are three things that I could do for that, right? Usually one of them is, sending, tailored CVs or resumes to clients, being able to, spend an hour doing that, right? And then the other 2-3 hours of on the phone work could be industry focused, right? Maybe we have a stellar MPC candidate that comes from a specific sector of the market. So I'm going to say to myself before I head out for the day, all right, tomorrow we're going to hit, medical device manufacturing companies that are undergoing an implementation, something of that sort, right? Or, I'm going to go through hiring managers that we've done a deal with over the last 5 years, but we haven't done one in the past year and see if we can bring them back on in the business. I think if you have that list already set up, that's half the battle. I think
Mm.
the times where maybe I didn't make a day plan and I came in the next day with zero structure or anything like that, I lost my mind. I know some people do it and they're very successful. For me, I just can't do it.
That's interesting. Um, Really interesting. And actually reminds me of a time when I was doing like kind of day plans equivalent for my day. And it's really difficult to get distracted when you have that plan, I think. I think
Mhm.
that's what I realize is it allows you to be more focused. And when you don't have that plan, it's quite easy to kind of drift and kind of forget about what it is you're meant to be doing. So it's really interesting. You've inspired me to get back to a day plan for myself, Matt, so thank you.
Well, there's
Um,
also something about the physical paper when you cross
yeah.
something like off the list. I don't know. It just there's like a primal urge with it that you're like,
Mm,
dang, I did something great today, Whereas like if
yeah.
if you're just thinking about it, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Do you have a digital copy of that, Matt? Your day plan by any chance?
Yeah, I could send something over to you for
That'd be
that.
great because then I can just put it on the screen now for people to see. Boom. The editor will hopefully lock that in. Um, and the 10 before 10, Matt, is that 10 client calls, not 10 candidate calls, just to confirm?
It could be a mixture of both. I
Cool.
usually try to split it up 5 and 5, or it depends on where the priority of the business is. If I'm, trying to, if I got a job that I really need some delivery on, it might be all 10 candidates, right? Sometimes it's a mixture of 5 leads, five, candidates I've been trying to talk to.
Cool. Awesome. That's really helpful.
Awesome.
I'm gonna you kindly, Matt, shared your billings for the last 10 years, which is epic. We don't normally get that much insight into people's numbers over such a long stretch of time. So you kindly shared it with us. I'm gonna read through it really quickly, and then we're gonna jump into, I guess, how you did it because there's an interesting pattern here with your numbers. So I'm gonna jump into starting from 2016. That you said that was only half a year, so that was your first year in recruitment, 77K. 2017, 160,000. 2018, 300,000. 2019, 540,000. 2020, 360,000. 2021, 600,000. 2022, a million. So hit your first million mark in 2022, which is amazing. 2023 is 680,000. 2024 is a million again. 2025 is 500,000. and then 2026 is on pace for 800K. So some pretty insane numbers, Matt. And it's interesting because there's a couple of points here. So 360 to 600,000, probably the biggest, and then a million. So that 2020 to 2022 was like the biggest increase, I think,
Mhm.
judging from these numbers. Um,
Yeah.
I'd love to ask what happened from the 600,000 to the a million mark? Because I think, correct if I'm wrong, guys, but that's the biggest leap that you've had. That's 400,000 increase from the previous year. Um, I think that looks like the biggest amount. Yeah, I think it is. What happened from 2021 to 2022, Matt, for you to hit an extra 400K? Because that's significant.
Yeah, so there was a couple of things that happened, and it was kind of a great mix of things that came in through a long time of being here, right? So
Mm,
when you see it there, where it is, success isn't an overnight story. And getting to that million mark 6 years in, I think it was a combination of three things. So the first one was being here 6 years. In the markets that I'm dealing in, we looked in the tech markets, the Microsoft technology space, a lot of it perm recruitment for the first part of my career. People end up switching jobs or getting promoted every 3 years, right? And so by that point, I'm 6 years into the business and I build up a decent amount of relationships. And either by that point, people have either left a company maybe once, maybe twice, or they've gotten promoted into now a director position, but I've kept in touch with them over the years. And after that, they were able to then rely on me to build out a team underneath them. So that was probably point number one. Point number two was, it was coming off of 2020, which I don't know if you guys remember it. There was a little bit of a virus that broke out or something that involved masks. I don't know. It was some crazy thing. I try to forget about it. But it really, set us all back a little bit on there. And from the tech side, there were a lot of projects that had gone uncompleted in that time because no one had any budgets for them. They were trying to retain people on payroll. The project still needed to get done, though, right? And we didn't really see a huge bounce back on that. It started a little bit in 2021, but by 2022, a lot of the clients realized, oh my God, we are way behind on everything. We need to accelerate this, right? So we were able to target many of those clients who maybe in 2020 we had a lead with, but now it's an urgent thing and be able to, get the best deal out of them, and work well on building out projects and teams. So there's a high degree of urgency there. The third thing was with the technology that I was working with primarily at the time. Microsoft Business Central is a sector that a lot of partners or consulting firms, whatever you want to call them, were trying to get into that space. It was a mid-market ERP. There was a high demand for it amongst customers. So we decided to target a lot of those clients that were building out divisions from scratch, right? They had this need for staff, right? And I think that's the last 2 points. I mean, the first one happens at any recruitment market, right? You stay in touch with your people that you place, and hopefully they pay you back at the end of the day, right? But on the other two, it's really just a kind of identifying, not just what your market is, but where is it at a certain time period, right? And so that you can go after the right clients more effectively with that, and not spend your time spinning your wheels on, maybe companies that okay, they use the product, but they don't have funding, they don't have the projects going on, and that sort of thing. So we were very selective with some of the companies there were, but there was a lot of demand at that time.
mm, interesting. Yeah, I was going to say I mean, they're all great points, but the thing that had the other recruiters would probably take the most from in terms of what they have control over is the targeting piece, right, Matt? Like you mentioned that you were really being intentional about who you're speaking to. Um, are there
This is a
any Sorry, go ahead, Sam. No, I was going to say this is a tough question, but was there any year out of those numbers that Ben just read out, Matt, where you had your biggest lessons? Like maybe you didn't bill as much, but you had your biggest lessons for X, Y, Z reason, or you learned the most. I'm curious, was there a year that comes to mind like that?
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I think oddly enough, even though it was before that run, I feel like I learned the most in 2019 about how to do the job. That was the first year that I broke the 500K mark and everything. And at the time, that was also when I started managing people. I don't do that anymore, but at the time, I was doing that, and I think kind of helping out other people sort of gave me lessons as to okay, well, if I'm telling them to do this, I'm not practicing what I'm preaching. I got to do this as well, right? And so it's going back to following that process, and and it's almost looking outwardly in order to look inwardly. I learned a lot about, the business itself, and wasn't just trying to attack it from, within those first 3 years, like, you know, s- banging the phones haphazardly and not knowing the clients, not thinking about what markets to go after. But I think that year helped me figure out what actually recruitment is. Thank God that I found out in year 3 and not year 8. But I think that year was where I learned the most. And then after that, we've kind of built upon that. Either there, it's interesting. In 2023, I feel like I learned a lot as well. It was coming off the $1 million year, riding a high off that, and then all of a sudden you have a bit of a letdown from there because whatever reason, there's a lot of changes in the market and our company, et cetera. But it's in those times where things are a little bit more challenging that you say, okay, well, I need to reframe. I can't be doing the same thing that I was doing last year. Let me go out and try a little bit of a different strategy here. And then you go into 2024 and you got to go back to where you were before on that. Even last year, for instance, where we were down because of the, our industry was heavily affected by the tariffs, a lot of things with
Mm,
the economy. I learned a lot from that. And I think even there, bouncing into this year now, there's a lot more potential. So even in a down year, you can always learn stuff a lot, even a lot more than you can on a good year.
interesting. Interesting, mate. And you say you hit the million. The following year, numbers were. Am I right in saying numbers weren't the same? That so you had to change strategy. Is that what you're referring to?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically, I think what happened in 2023 was we were trying to do a lot of the same things we were doing in 22.
Yeah.
Of course, sometimes they don't work again, right? People aren't
Yes.
going to buy the same car every year, right? So
Yeah.
going into 2024, we said, all right, what are we going to do differently? And I say we because not just myself, but looking at the team around me, right? And
Mm.
we decided to change things up, and I think it, had a much better impact than
Uh,
what we were doing a couple of years before.
And what were you doing, and what did you change out of interest, just so I can understand the needle mover?
Yeah. So the ironic thing is that, as I talked about in 2022, there were a lot of these smaller firms that were trying to break into the space, right? And so we were targeting a lot of them, and there was growth. In 2023, though, a lot of those companies ended up having a bit of a shake year. They realized that you don't just break into a new product, and it's a bit tougher than normal. So a lot of them ended up getting eaten up by a lot of private equity, M&A activity. They started kind of being formed into certain clients that we didn't have partnerships with, so we couldn't just work with them directly. We now had to try to break into the parent company. But we took that into 2024 and said, all right, well, let's look at if this is kind of the direction of the market, that a lot of these smaller companies are getting eaten up by the bigger groups that are private equity backed, or whatever the case might be, they have a lot of funding. Instead of going after the smaller fish on the or the smaller leaves on the tree, let's go after you know the main headquarters, if you will, the mothership, right?
Mm.
And then with that, we'll have a bit more of a trickle down effect. So we found a couple of really great clients within that were kind of controlling those, and then through there we were able to get introductions into some of the smaller firms and kind of build out the teams from the top down as opposed to the bottom up.
That's Interesting. interesting. So the biggest thing I got from there is that you changed the decision makers you were going after. So you were going after the was it private equity? Sorry, Matt. Was this one firm that owned lots of firms, or would it fall under that bracket?
In some cases, yes, and mainly it was private equity backed firms, right? So
Cool.
maybe
Okay.
these are the ones who in 2023 when when other companies were going out of business, these are the ones that were getting the investment, and they were saying, all right, well, this company's got a lot of potential. We're going to pump a lot of money into them, and of course, with more money, more projects comes more talent, and the
Yes.
need there. So we kind of went after the CIOs and the decision makers within those groups that we knew at least had the budget to spend.
Lovely. And that's a great strategy. And I'm sure everyone, if they could get in with those clients, would be like, yes, this is amazing. So I guess my next question is, Matt, how did you, because, if there's anything I know about private equity backed or like private equity firms, they're even busier than like normal, like say normal businesses, because they're juggling 50 things at once. They're managing multiple businesses. Their time is incredibly valuable. I'm wondering, how did you get through to those decision makers and then get them on your book, so to speak?
Yeah. So I think the key thing is where we operate in is, and with our company, is even a little bit of background. And we operate in very niche technology markets within it, right? And we have divisions that cover a wide array of different tech sectors, not just Microsoft, but all across the Salesforce, NetSuite, Power BI, all these different things, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there's still always that really hard to fill role in any company. right? And it'd be one thing to go after and try to sell everything all at once, right? Which is a strategy you could do. Where I found the most success was trying to find that most niche, most tough to fill position and at least try to break in from there and say, hey, look, Mr. Client, this role, I see you've had it posted for 6 months. You're filling everything else right now. That's great. But this one you seem to be having some trouble with. This type of role is all I do every single day of the week. Give us a shot on this one. You got nothing to lose. If we don't find somebody, whatever, it'll still be open. You don't have to pay us anything up front or anything like that.
Mm,
And, what happened was we would end up filling these really tough roles. And with that, that would start building the trust with the client to be able to say,
awesome.
oh, well, if they can do this, then, well, we have 10 other, business intelligence analyst roles to work. Do you guys do that? Of course we do. All right. It'll started to open up the conversation once you build that credibility and trust from, if you can handle the hard stuff, then all right, well, we're going to trust you with some of the easier roles as well. But
Mm,
either way, though, every role there's no such thing as an easy recruitment job, right? Everything is it's just on a scale of harder or easier.
Yeah.
and what was the role, Matt? The one that you were talking about, it might have been different for different companies, but what was the really, really hard to fill role that you were trying to fill?
Yeah, so it's basically comes down to the product that we deal with, which is Microsoft Business Central. It's an ERP accounting type software. There's a lot of people that work with it, but there's very few that are sort of a cream of the crop when it comes to people that are looking for new opportunities. So less than 1% unemployment rate in this market, and
Wow,
it's very different than a lot of other just general tech products out there. So we would break into there,
interesting.
as sort of the inroad.
Interesting. I love that. So you basically niched and specialized so much that you're able to kind of showcase that to these larger firms and be like, hey, I can help you with this.
Yeah.
Love that. That's really interesting. Um, and it makes a lot of sense. I'd love to go into question number 3, which is you have a slightly different saying for the classic NPC approach. You call it the CLC approach. Do you mind sharing why you call it the CLC approach, Matt? What does that stand for and why is it different?
Yeah, so a lot of people talk about NPC, and I think it's, especially if you're a newcomer, you might think, okay, well, what is the most placeable candidate, right? So, giving away a secret that's probably widely known in the industry already, but I call it CLC, cheap, local, and charming, right? I don't want it to think like, oh, it's cheap, like this person's terrible at the job. They have to. I think the preface is it has to be a good candidate. At least they
Yeah.
have to be referenced. They have to know the product and they have to know, at least have the experience to back it up. Um, but going into each one, right? Cheap is important because companies, as much as they want to think they want to drive a Rolls Royce or a Lamborghini, at the end of the day, they'll be fine with a Toyota Camry if it gets them to from point A to point B and it won't cost them too much, right?
Yeah.
Which is why there's hundreds of thousands of Camrys sold every year and like 2,000 Rolls Royces sold every year, right? So people love a good deal. You hit them with somebody that's got a great skill set that's 30K below the market value. Immediately they just think in their head, oh, that's 30,000 less than we've interviewed anyone else at. Great. Local, because we look at right now the return to office movement is big. For a while we got about 2 years lucky when it came to remote work, but we're going back to the days of 2016, 2017 of we need somebody on site 5 days a week, and a lot of these clients are getting folks that are outside the country, they work remotely, they're outside the state. I always find that if you don't just say like, oh, greater Atlanta area or Philadelphia area, but you can be specific to say like Downington, Pennsylvania, right? The client all of a sudden their ears perk up and they go, oh, wow, okay, that's right down the road. Whereas greater Philly, it could be an hour and a half away on the other side of the city.
Mm,
JP Morgan's back in the office, Goldman Sachs is back in the office. Everyone's trying to get back in there, whether we like it or not. And that kind of leads to the last one, which is being a charming person, right? You could have 20 years of software development, solutions architecture, a project manager. You could be, you could have ran for president in 1996, whatever, right? When you go into that interview, that's 90% of what I feel like clients are looking for outside of technical skill set. Is this somebody that I can get along with on a day-to-day basis, right? Especially when you're looking at mid-level roles and you have a hiring manager who's going to be overseeing them. Like, is this somebody that's intelligent? They're outgoing. They seem like they get it, right? Um, if somebody has that, I've found at least 9 times out of 10, the client's going to go with them, even if they have maybe 5 years of experience versus somebody who's got 20 years of experience, but can't articulate themselves well, right?
Mm.
They show up to the interview and they're wearing, a cutoff sleeve shirt and, a bathing suit, something crazy like that. Although I shouldn't joke, I did have a guy one time show up wearing a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts and flip flops, and he got the job for what it was worth.
Whoa.
They loved it. And the president phones me up and he goes, "I love this guy's energy." And I was like, "All right, well, that's charming in a way, right?" So if you can have somebody that has all three skill sets and is good, I've always found that that's sort of the secret to getting a bite from a client. And once you have the bite, then you can go from there.
Love it. Super, super useful, especially the local one. So, am I right in saying that every single NPC that you pitch out, you are building a list of people in a what is considered local? Is it like state, Matt? So you'll only place people in New York, or is it even more niche in terms of that local area? How does it work with that?
Yeah, it all depends. I try to make it the more local, the better. Of course, there's some markets that don't have a lot of clients, so you expand it, right? If you go Bakersfield, California, there's a whole lot of nothing going on out there. So you may have to do a 50-mile radius, right? But a
Yeah.
client might like somebody who's out there that can come in one day a week, right? If you're going somewhere that's more like Chicago, where there's a ton of Chicagoland suburbs out there, um, saying Chicago, that somebody's going to say like, all right, well, he's in the city. We're all the way out in Schaumburg. That's like an hour drive from us. So I try to keep at least the city relevant to a point where I'm not trying to give away who the person is or anything.
Yeah.
But the more localized, the better.
Awesome. And now I'm fascinated. You found your NPC who's cheap, local, and charming. You've built your list. What are you saying in this message to grab their attention? I would love to know that, Matt.
Yeah. So if it's a phone call, I'll go right into, I'll try to, have a candidate that is also maybe industry based as well. That'd be the icing on top. But, let's say I'm calling up a client who's been looking for this type of resource for a while and we've seen it on the job boards, whatever. First thing I say is, hey, look, Mr. Client, I understand you guys have been looking for a ERP developer for the last 3 months. If I told you right now that I had somebody that lives 10 minutes away from your office and is willing to work on site 5 days a week, at about 30K less than what you're seeing from probably the average people that you're talking to, would you want to continue the conversation? Right.
Hmm.
Um, if they haven't found somebody yet, then odds are they'll at least continue talking, right?
Mm.
And then you're getting a whole spider web of things to talk about afterwards. But I think the key thing is not just saying what the salary is, but hey, that it's this much less than what the other people that you're probably talking to is going to be. That could be 10 grand, 20 grand, whatever it is. But I think when they see that number, they automatically think, okay, well, let's create an ROI on our balance sheet.
It's interesting. We
Awesome.
I don't think we've ever had anyone mention. Maybe Mike Williams mentioned it briefly, and
Yeah.
Isaac, but beyond that, not many people have mentioned people who are below market and framing that as part of the offer, which is really interesting and it makes perfect sense. Like, if you can get, as you say, everyone loves a deal, Matt, and so if you can frame that as a deal and that they're qualified and charming and local, it's like a no-brainer. So it's really, really interesting. Um, I'd love to jump on to question 4, which is, you said that BD isn't a skill problem a lot of the time, Matt. You think it's a will problem.
Mhm.
Can you describe what you mean when you said that?
Yeah. So I think if you go and again, a lot of people work remotely in this industry, and so they probably don't see a lot when it comes to what to compare to. But anybody that's ever worked in any sales job, right? I've worked in a few, and can be out in an open floor where you see the other salespeople. They know that there's only a fraction of the people that are actually going out there and selling, which is craziness to me because like it's a phone sales job. You should be on the phone all day, but I don't know. Maybe that doesn't translate to some people. I don't know. That's besides the point. But I think the problem is a lot of people will come in and they'll say, "Oh wow, I just called 2 people, no one picked up. on the first one, and on the second one, somebody screamed at me, "I hate my life. I want to go home." Where it's like you just got to laugh with it. You got to roll with it. For me, I can't wait till somebody just yells at me on the phone during the day for bothering them because I know that it's gonna come, right? So
Mm.
you might as well roll with it, and then usually after that, you can diffuse the situation with that client anyway. So I think when it comes to the skill and the will problem, it's really not that hard to BD. I don't think it is. It's about NPCing. It's about showing what you have, what value. We're not, most of us in the recruitment space, maybe there are some, we're not, litigators or anything like that. We have to study law. It's about, hey, do you have this problem and can't find somebody for it? Great, I have somebody for this, right? And if you do that for 3 hours a day, every day of the week, consistently, odds are you're going to get jobs on. But a lot of people, it's tough. Your first year as well, you get discouraged doing it. You see the top billers out there, you think, oh my God, I could never get there. And, all of a sudden you give up on it. Right. So I think you just got to keep doing it. And, the more you do it, eventually you'll shoot enough shots, you'll hit something.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have to say, probably one of the biggest reasons why people aren't getting enough business. It's typically volume. It's typically they're
Hmm.
not spending enough time on BD. Obviously, there's a lot of recruiters that are I say a lot. There's a portion of recruiters that are hammering the phones, sending tons of emails, and really trying their best to win business. But the vast majority of them, when I ask them, they're just not spending enough time. Like it's just simply they're not dedicating enough time to it, which is interesting. So I completely agree with you. Um, you mentioned something called a power hour, Matt, which I found quite interesting. What does that look like? Can you describe what a power hour is in your world? And is it every day? Is it once a week? Is it twice a day?
Yeah. So I try to do at least one power hour every day. If I could do two or three, well, three's three, I wouldn't say I would do three phone power hours every day, but I'd say I do probably three every day. Right. And so
Mm,
what a power hour is, although if anybody here is on here, I'm not talking about the drinking power hour, although maybe some days might lead you to that with how recruitment tends to be. But what I mean is for that whole hour, 60 minutes, you turn off your email, you turn off your phone text messages, you turn off your, you know, Microsoft Teams message, you might be in Slack, all of that gets shut down. And all you do is just focus on, like you said before, contact equals contract. You just focus on making contacts, right? Now, that could be, for me, I like using the phone. I'm a little bit old school in that way. I'll just dial for an hour straight, right? For some people, and we started doing this as well, it's been pretty effective. For an hour straight, all you're doing is just leaving voice memos on LinkedIn to people and send it that way. Other times, we'll just for an hour, we'll pull up all of our leads that we need CVs to, and just for an hour straight, just go after those, right? So that way there's no distraction. And in that time, what you start to develop is a bit of a flow state. I talked a little bit about this before, but it's a bit meditative in a sense, right? Once you start, that first two or three dials, you'll probably sound terrible, right? I do still, and I've been doing this 10 years. But by like call number 4 or 5, you start to cook a little bit. And then by call 15, all of a sudden you're like Jordan Belfort. You could take any objection on the phone, like, whatever they throw at you, you're selling them car insurance, you're doing whatever at that point. So it's all about just getting into a rhythm and just keep getting on with it for that full hour. Now, once you start going past the hour, then it's like, all right, you start to get a little tired. You don't want to do it anymore. So I always say, like, after that, I always put a little bit of a 5-minute break time, to reward yourself. Maybe that's go get a coffee, go step outside, take a walk or something just to like decompress from that. But big believer in the power hour.
awesome.
Love it, man.
And I know you mentor. You said you mentor some recruiters as well, Matt. Um, what are some of the things that you notice that they aren't doing that you tend to focus on? Like, if there was a few things that you noticed, there's younger recruiters or less experienced recruiters come in. What are some of the problems you're picking them up on? Do you think what are the things that they're not doing that they should be?
Yeah, I mean, I would say again, going back to it, they're relying a little bit too much on research and a lot of passivity there. I would say the one thing that I notice is that you'll find a lot of people will think that scrolling on LinkedIn for an hour to try and figure out what this company does or who's the point of contact. It's like you wasted 15 minutes. They're probably not going to pick up the phone anyway. Average is that, most people are working and doing something else. Just go for it, right? What's the worst that happens? The person picks up and they say, "Oh, I'm not the right point of contact." Oh, great. Who is? Then you find out and you go from there, right? So I would say just, falling into a bit of a research anxiety trap of thinking too much about it is something that people do wrong. And the other thing I think a lot of people do wrong is they go in and they don't know what they're selling exactly. Because you hear
Mm.
from one manager, "Hey, you got to go in and sell our whole business's services." They hear from another manager, "You got to do this." You got to hear one person tell you, "Oh, well, you don't sell, you tell them what you do and then try to follow up." So just stick to one thing and experiment for that for a month, right? Don't try to come in and do a sales pitch for this guy, sales pitch number two for this guy, whatever. Stick to one thing and just see how that progresses over the time. If after 2 weeks it doesn't work, okay, switch it up a little bit. But you're just going to confuse yourself and you're going to distract yourself trying to think about what to say. Don't think, just throw, just get in there.
Mm. Love that. And out of everything we've discussed, Matt, am I right in saying that an NPC is your most successful way of winning new business, or is it just or is it something else that we haven't mentioned?
I would say the NPC is probably the most successful way I've got it. And the only other way that I would say would be if there's companies out there that are like publicly advertising that they're looking for something, and then
Yeah,
you can approach it in more of a, "Hey, well, this is the service that we offer." But for those cold BD sessions and for companies you've never spoken to before, but have a rough idea as to what they do, I think it's just the easiest way to sell at the end of the day, right?
yeah.
We want to keep things easy.
Yeah, awesome, mate. And I just had a question on the cheap, local, charming, specifically the cheap. I'm guessing the candidates who are good but also cheap. My thought process was they don't come around that often. Like to find someone who's good, looking to move, is charming, local, and is willing to accept maybe a bit less. Does that happen often? And if you can't find cheap, what's the next best like lever you're pulling on, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think that, and you make a great point, right? The key thing here is that the companies that are going to be using recruiters by and large have a problem and that needs to get solved. Or on the flip side, the role that they're looking to fill, which might even be the problem, is something that they haven't been able to fill on their own, right? Now, most companies out there, if they look for somebody that's at or above market rate and it's fully remote and again, I'm talking about my industry, I can't speak for other ones, but in the tech sector, right? If it's
Yeah.
above market average, it's fully remote and we're hiring a million people. So, we'll interview him once as long as he, doesn't fall asleep on the call, we can hire him, right? Like that's the ideal world, right? By and large, though, if you're especially dealing within an SMB market, right, where these companies typically are cash strapped and need to get projects done, they have probably looked throughout the market and can't find those people that are, at market average for pay or above it, right? So you
Mm,
have to, a big part of business development is even just finding the candidates, right? And always be
mm.
calling candidates, knowing your market, knowing who's available, right? I think though, if you can't find, if I had to pick of the three, right, between cheap, local, and charming, I would, if I could keep two out of three and get rid of the third, I would probably, well, number one, I'd keep charming, 100%, right?
Yeah,
You got to be able to pass the interview and be
yeah.
able to work them on that. Beyond that, I think I would probably choose cheap in all honesty,
Mm,
because,
interesting.
for what you could sell to a client is that, hey, they can't be there every day, right? Maybe they come in once a week or once a month, right? And you got to fly them in, right? Well, Mr. Client, they're 30 grand less than the next person, right? All the flights and hotels that you're going to be paying for them to come in is still going to have you come in and 10 grand less than what you wanted to spend on that, right? So you can sell it a little bit that way, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when it's local, it's like, all right, well, we looked at the balance sheet at the end of the day and we're paying $200,000, 50 grand above what we should be paying, this person just for him to work on site. We're going to fire him immediately, right? And just
Mm,
find and just outsource it. So I would probably choose cheap and charming, if anything. Which is which is to say, hey, in a perfect world, we get all three, but I think those are probably the two most important. If you have somebody that can do the job.
Awesome, man. And out of interest, the people who are cheaper, are they the people who have been underpaid at their last company and you're still giving them a bump, but it's not like, top market value? What is their candidate's position typically when you approach them and they're cheaper out of interest?
Yeah, so I think one thing that happens a lot here, and when I say cheap, I don't want to put anyone down. It's like, oh well, or we're scamming people out of money.
Yeah,
We're
of
charging
course.
them less than what the market rate is, right? But if somebody's way underpaid, right, and let's say that the market average is 130,000 a year, right, but they're at 80 grand, right,
Yeah.
but we get them something that's 120, right? It's still a 40K pay bump for them. And the other
Mm,
thing to think about is when the job is remote, you deal with cost of living differences, right? So
mm,
$150,000 in New York is a lot different than $150,000 in, New Mexico or Florida or
yeah.
anywhere else where the cost of living is a little bit different, right? So that's one area. But the other thing I think that's more important, well, there's two things, right? One is that you might have somebody that's great at the job, but they only have 2 years of experience. And
Mm,
they could be just as good as somebody who's got 15 years of experience, right? But that person that's been there 15 years, they're going to want much more salary, right? Whereas somebody who's a couple of years out of school, they can probably do a developer job just fine, right? But
mm,
because they haven't been here for a while, they know that, all right, well, this amount of money works for me, right?
yeah.
So you try to make it work for the candidate. I'm not out here. I would never go out and try to lowball anybody and try to
Of
say,
course.
hey, well, you should take 40 grand less, your kids can have less presents for Christmas, right? Like, I'm not going to do that, right? I always wanted to be somewhat of an increase, unless the other option, which we do try to go for as well, is, where it's less about a money motivation, right? There are so many
Mm,
people out there that are working jobs with crazy bosses. I think about the movie Horrible Bosses, right? With Kevin
yeah, yeah.
Spacey and Colin Farrell. And it's like, there's people that work in those jobs every day, right? And for them,
Mm,
they'll say, hey, look, I don't need to be at, you know, the highest salary in the world. Like, I just want to have my life back, right? Like, I
mm,
want to be able to hang out with my kids after work and not work a 40-hour, week, on top of my already 40-hour week, right? So getting
yeah.
80 hours total in there. So it's all about the candidate needs. Yeah, you have to really drill down into that at the end of the day. You can't be transactional in this business and just say, oh, well, he's this dollar sign, right? So we can sell
Mm,
him in for this. It's gotta really be worth it to them.
yeah, love it, man. Great detail. Thanks for that, Matt. Awesome. Matt, we are coming up to the end of the pod. I can't believe how quickly it's gone. I'd love to finish off with any thoughts you have. Is there any questions that we have not asked you over your 10 years experience that might help a recruiter listening to this get more value, bill more, do a better job, be a better recruiter? Anything that we've missed, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think and by the way, I couldn't believe that as well. I looked at the time here, and this has been great chatting with you guys. Feel like I'm even learning some things on this as well. But I think the last thing that I can just impart, especially to anyone that is a newer newer candidate, a newer recruiter in this space, is it's not an overnight success. There are people that come out there and they're doing 300 grand in a year, right? They're doing, they're lightning speed ahead, right? That isn't the average person, right? For me, it took 6 years, in my opinion, to do something really great in this business,
Mm,
right? And so I would just say focus on starting small, getting those small wins. I think if you try to get like 6 clients in a year, right, that you can do a deal with, which is one every other month, right? It's nothing, you're not going too crazy on that. If you could start off by that and just build every year with and just stay consistent with what you're doing, focus on the process, right? Like, you'll be fine and you'll eventually outbill anyone else that's out there, just as long as you keep sticking with it, right? A lot of people I've seen come in, they do great their first year, and then all of a sudden they have a bit of a sophomore slump and they leave the business to do something altogether. So look at it
mm,
like the tortoise and the hare, a little bit at a time, and eventually you'll hopefully be a success, right?
love it. Great way to end the pod, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on, mate. Lots of little bits of wisdom here, and yeah, really appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. Great to speak with you, and good luck to all the listeners out there. Hope I imparted some good knowledge.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. Tune in for another episode next week, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Peace and love.